So something I was thinking of while we were in that last kind of train of thought in general, the concept of Trump's base being a group of people who are not willing to take a handout, or maybe not willing is not even the accurate phrasing, but the whole idea of I don't need a handout. I'm going to continue to work hard for my goal or my dream or whatever the phrasing you want to use is.
It could even be just my existence. Even if I never get to the next level, I'm going to work hard to be here where I am.
Right. What it kind of prompted were two disparate thoughts. The first of those being the group of people who their measurement for success is doing better than their parents. Right? So maybe in some cases, maybe it's an immigrant family who was poor and their measure for success is just consistently putting food on the table. And it's incremental for each generation thereafter where their measurement for success is a little bit better or a little bit better. And not to pick on immigrants, because there are plenty of native families that would feel the same way, right?
Totally.
That's one group, is that their measurement for success has nothing to do with anything other than I want to do better than what I grew up in for my kids. And so that's one. And the other, I think, is more rooted in this ideal of I work for what I get. Or the way I have described it in the past as the typical American idealism of I don't need the government to do something for me because I am supposed to work for what I get. There's this kind of, it's not entitlement, it's more
right.
a high valuation of self-worth based on the work that you put into something, equating what you get out of it.
Yeah, it's like this sense of self-sufficiency.
Well, and I hesitated to say self-sufficiency because I think it goes beyond that. I don't think it's just being self-sustaining in a fashion. I think it's the focus on the previous statement that if I work hard for something, eventually I will get there. It's more than just a level of sufficiency or sustainability. It's I continue to put the effort in, and eventually I will improve my situation. Does that make sense? Because I feel like there's a difference there.
Yeah, and then there's this idea that you don't take a handout or you don't get help from the government because part of it's pride, but part of it is also...
I have a really, really focused piece there.
Go ahead.
So I know we've mentioned in the past, I've had general discussions with different people focused around this concept of socialism equating communism and everything else. We even talked about it, I think, last episode. There's a mentality there that doesn't want to take a government handout because it's accepting the reality that socialist policies are not inherently evil. And perfect examples are, even though they're imperfect in implementation, the perfect examples are things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. They're not implemented ideally in a way that make them self-sustaining, and there are problems. We'll just kind of leave it at that. But there are a lot of people who do everything in their power to avoid getting those benefits because they view it as an affront to their idea of what American ideals and government should propagate. They look at it as a handout instead of a benefit to be enjoyed and shared and equitably distributed by all, in theory.
Right. We're paying into the system. The system should pay out to us as needed.
Yeah.
So, somebody recently was talking to me. He was talking about how he was going to soon be off of unemployment, and he was like, and it did what it needed to do. Like, it served its exact purpose. It's like, my job went away when the pandemic hit. I was on unemployment. Now I can work again. Now, like, there's actually a job for me to do that I'm suited for, that fewer people are, and now I don't need, it's like, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. And that's exactly what it's supposed to do. Is it took him from point A to point B, which is a relatively short period of time. And, he was like, it kept me, I didn't have to go work in a restaurant. And quite frankly, he didn't need to be in a restaurant because that was a bad place to be because we had a pandemic going on. And two, like, restaurants weren't open. Like, restaurant owners were having a hard time. They were laying people off because fewer people were going into restaurants. So it was just this whole, this is like the system working. And instead of thinking that it's a personal failure or it is the spread of communism, it's just you pay into the system, and if you ever need it, the system is there to help you along.
Well, I think that's part of the disconnect, is a lot of people don't realize how parts of these things are funded. Like Social Security is easy to point to because you see that taken out of your paycheck as well. And so most people accept Social Security because they've seen it their entire lifespan being something that is at least associated with their income, right?
Yeah.
Unemployment, I mean, corporations pay for that. That is not it is not something that is purely a taxpayer burden. It is not something that you can make a convoluted argument that why should I pay for other people not to work? None of those scenarios are legitimate. Like, companies take on the burden of funding unemployment with, I'm sure, some level of subsidization by, taxation in general, but not to the levels or extremes that people want to make it out to be.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of abstracts even further that people really don't have a grasp of what taxes are for. Taxation is a way to provide funds to governmental agencies to distribute and utilize as they see fit. That's it. That's all taxes are really for in a nutshell. And different things are taxed different ways.
I mean, that's a whole problem in and of itself that we shouldn't get into here. But yeah, all things considered, that money comes in. It's meant to be used for all sorts of things. And I've heard before, it's like the government should only be responsible for roads and defense. And I'm just like, you can't see me, but I'm furrowing my brow.
Oh, I can imagine that quite well.
And I'm just like, okay. And I had this like really interesting idea, and I haven't felt that my premise was defeated at this point. So I'll share it. And that is that in some ways you are okay with paying into a system that pays out when people need it. And we call it car insurance. So it's a little bit different because these are private companies, but they're government. Having car insurance is a government mandate. At least in this state, a liability is required. But you pay out a certain amount of money, your premium, so that if you ever have a problem, it's taken care of. You've got a deductible, all this. But you've got a disproportionate number of people that have more accidents than others. And that being the case, then if you're a person that has fewer accidents on average than someone else, you're paying for the repair of their car. You're paying into a system that pays out to somebody who needs it more than you do. And I think like one of the responses I have gotten was like, well, that's just how it is. I'm like, I know. Why are you okay with this, but not that?
Yeah, it's a very good comparison because it illustrates the in a very practical way what I was trying to kind of get at from a theoretical perspective, that most people just don't understand the connections. Car insurance, you see the connection. You know that if you have an accident, insurance is there to be able to provide financial assistance in getting back to the norm, quote unquote, like taking you from whatever less than ideal state, for lack of better phrasing, back to where you were or better. People don't think of governmental programs in the same fashion. Instead, it is, here is this body telling me I have to do something and I don't want to do it. Well, why? Can you actually...
You're a petulant child.
Right. Can you actually tell me why? Or is it just because there is this mandate that you can't evade? Like, you know what I mean? Like a better way to phrase that. When it comes to car insurance, you can evade that and run a certain level of risk, and you have a sense of choice. When it comes to government programs that you have to pay into, or you have to fund or be a part of, whatever the case may be.
Pay taxes. Right.
It is far more difficult to evade that responsibility, and instead looks more like you have to do this, period. You have no choice in the matter. So even if you would choose to fund it on the one hand for the government program, and you would choose to fund it for like insurance, you view them differently because you feel like you have a choice on the private side, and you don't feel like you have a choice from the government side.
Right.
So the perception of choice ends up being more important than what it actually is that you're discussing.
And I think that, I mentioned, I was being condescending when I said because you're a petulant child, but I was just thinking about parenting, and that like when my kids were little, it's like it was so much better for them if I gave them a choice instead of telling them what to do. Like you can either wear the red shirt or you can wear the blue shirt, but you are wearing a shirt is what's implied. And when that choice is given, it's like the red shirt, and there's not a fight about not wearing a shirt. And it turns out that probably doesn't change a lot as you get older.
No, not at all. I don't know what parenting guidance was like prior to my need to actually read a little bit about it. But one of the big things that has been hugely beneficial in our approach has been always provide 2 or more choices. It doesn't have to be anything revelationary. It can be as simple as red or blue shirt.
Right.
But a lot of times it's a matter of, are you choosing or am I choosing? And that alone quells any argument or dissent or anything else. It's giving them a feeling of control over the outcome, which is the same thing that every single human being wants in life at a fundamental level.
That's a nice way of saying that, but I really think it's just more playing into the notion that we have free will and have some manner of control over what's about to happen to us.
I was wondering which one of us was going to mention free will first.
The illusion of free will. I think we should just say that and not go into that at all right now.
I'm okay with that, except that, I can't leave that topic completely untouched. I will phrase it this way, and then I will leave it to you beyond that, whether we go any further. I do believe that we have the ability to choose between outcomes. Every time we make a decision, we are choosing one way or another. That does not necessarily state that it is free will. It is a freedom of choice. Free will is a more abstract concept that implies there is no fate or destiny component to life.
That was very satisfactory.
I try.
Yeah. So I put this thing in the notes about the way our school system has or the direction our school system is going, and how much politics is playing into this. There's been a lot of things going on, but the trend feels like our education system is no longer valuing free thinking, critical thinking, abstract thinking, and is slanted heavily towards indoctrination. And this is seen on a lot of different levels. And quite frankly, it's starting to become scary with the legislation that's being passed regarding critical race theory, to the point where teachers are going to be penalized for teaching critical race theories in certain ways, certain places.
So I agree. Like I want to preface this with, I completely agree. I think the view on this, though, is slightly skewed. And the reason I say that is, if I go back to my education, I felt that way at the time and still feel that way today. Like I feel like my education was an attempt at indoctrination into American society. I don't necessarily think this is a new thing. Like if you were to...
It's not a new thing.
Well, I'm trying to phrase it in a way that makes more sense, because it's definitely not a new thing. Like education, religion, every societal construct is a way to indoctrinate people of a society into said society. I mean, that's the whole nature of any societal construct. But what I mean is, it seems scary now, but I think if you were able to go back and look at curriculum over 50, 60 years, you would say the same premise and general concept across the board. And the reason it doesn't seem as scary to me as it should, I suppose, is twofold. I have never put much faith in the American education system. That's kind of number one. That's the premise that you have to accept in order to be on board with any of the following statements that I make.
Yeah.
And I am a product of a system that attempted to indoctrinate me, but I was more curious about things in general than what the system could provide information to me about. And therefore, if I were to go back and really look at where did I learn things or what did I learn, it's overwhelmingly outside of my education that I learned anything other than what I would be tested on. And the reason I make that specific distinction is because I have a very different view from the majority of people about where learning takes place. The American educational system, the nice way to say it is that it is a subpar project. I was really trying to figure out words there. Most learning, in my opinion, takes place outside of the American educational system.
Yeah.
The trick is where does that learning take place? Is it more among peers? Is it more among a particular social group, or is it more at home? And part of my goal as a parent is to try to make that more of a home activity than a peer group or a particular social group. And that's difficult. I don't want to, I certainly don't want to make that seem like an easy choice or an easy thing to do. What I'm kind of driving at, though, is that I don't expect my son to learn most things at school. I expect him to learn most things through inquisitiveness and exploration and guidance from home. And that viewpoint is not shared by the vast majority of Americans, which is the problem.
Yeah, I've had similar thoughts about that with my children are going to school to learn how to work in society. They're learning how to be in a certain setting that allows you to work both as individuals as well as a collective. And, they pick up some things here and there about reading and writing and so forth. But, a lot of what school teaches you to do is here's a snippet of what you should be learning, and you're going to have to learn a lot of this on your own.
I agree to a point, but I think it's even more abstract than that. I think it's more, this is what your day-to-day typically looks like in a structured setting, not necessarily what you have to know or what you have to do. It's more, this is how you have to behave in this setting.
Yeah. Yes. And I said it wrong. It's like these are the highlights, and there's more to learn, and it's going to be done outside of the classroom. And I don't mean homework. Yeah,
I agree, because there's really no teacher that is a substitute for experience.
Right.
Right. I mean, we've learned this over time through every possible path you can think of. Like, I don't care how well educated you are. Nothing prepares you for the real world aspects of on-the-job learning.
Well, you're a little kid, so there's only, you know a lot less. Like, I've told my kids, like, I was like, you guys are smarter than me. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, you're smarter than me. And they're like, that can't be, Dad. And I was like, no. I know a lot more things than you do because I'm older and I've been around longer. I just know more stuff. That's different than being smarter. That's different than how you work these things out. And it's different than, being cognizant of what's around you, how things work, how to adapt, how to be resilient. And right now, school is like, training. There's a whole bunch of stuff you've got to just learn about. And it's like any job. They give you like a little bit of training, and then they tell you to go do the job, and then you learn how to do the job as you're doing the job. And so I feel like school is like the longest training, and then you go out into the world and you do things as you get old enough to not be completely run over by all of the other adults that don't care.
This is where I have to also interject that the American educational system is not similar in scope or function to many other educational systems. Because there are places where what the American educational system refers to as elementary and middle school would be primary education. And then there's a divergence into either preparation for advanced schooling that we would consider, master's, doctorate level schooling, or a divergence into a craft or a trade that particular concept does not truly exist in the American education system. It's attempted in some ways, but it does not actually exist. And I think that is a drastically overlooked disparity between the way other countries look at education and the way we look at education.
I'm not that familiar with how other countries and approach education. I mean, I hear various things like this that make a lot of sense to me, but it's a lot. At least a lot has changed. It used to be a time where in the American education system, you would complete the required portion, K through 12, and then you had the option of going on to study 4 more years if you paid for it, and you were often able to focus in on something that interests you, hopefully, or some people were a little bit what's the word I'm looking for here?
Well, I can think of multiple, but like
there's a whole dictionary of words, and I can't think of the one that I'm looking for. The one.
What I think you're getting at is that hopefully it's something that appeals to you, but a lot of people make a choice based on either a whim or pressure from outside influences.
Oh, or even on top, or like, oh, this will make me, I'll go into an industry that's going to make me some money.
Right.
I guess that's
still pressure from outside.
Yeah, I got there.
The difference being that a number of other countries look at education just differently enough to make a lot of sense. So, where we have K through 12, you might have half a dozen classes over that time frame that are geared toward your choice in some fashion. Like you might choose to do 4 classes focused in an area that it's based on availability for the school district, and it's based on whether you have even the ability to make choices there and what other requirements there are based on a number of different factors. But to give an example, for my education, I had a total of, I think, 6 electives from K through 12. 2 of those ended up being foreign languages above and beyond my foreign language requirement. And then 4 of those were vocational, quote-unquote, endeavors. And that was predominantly things like parliamentary procedure, work study, things that were more practical in application to life in general, right? And then beyond that, you have the pursuit of various levels of higher education, ranging from a 2-year associate degree to a 4-year bachelor's. That rounds out your undergraduate. You can go to another 2 years for a master's, and yet another 2 years for a doctorate, give or take, a decade, depending on how quickly you go through required classes and everything else. But it's all driven by, one, personal preference, two, personal accessibility and availability of resources to fund said preference, and three, access to those resources. In a lot of places, you have a similar ubiquitous education for what we would consider kindergarten through, say, 8th grade, or the general end of middle school as a whole. And then you could pursue academic pursuits in preparation for higher education, or you could pursue more vocational pursuits such as woodworking or automotive skills or some trade craft as a specialized focus to be prepared at the end of your schooling to go straight into that profession. And that is a disparity that there's no equivalency for in the American education system. Because in the United States, the idea is that you would get your 12 years of education and be prepared for higher education. But if you wanted to do something vocational, then you enter into an apprenticeship and gain those skills at that point, similar to what you would do if you went on and pursued higher academic pursuits after your primary education instead. And so there's no ready and able to assimilate into the workforce group of people coming out of school. It's instead a group of people who are able to pass standardized tests coming out of school, and then everything they need to know about how to assimilate into the workforce is learned from that point forward, when there's just no point in it. If you are the type of person that enjoys carpentry, you should be able to come out of your primary education curriculum with the basic ability to go to work for a carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
If your desire is to pursue a astrophysics degree and, some level of scientific endeavor that requires you have additional schooling, you should be prepared to enter a school or agency at a level that you can contribute to that field. You shouldn't have to complete 12 to 13 years of education that really doesn't do anything beyond say, if you apply yourself from this point forward, you can get to this point.
Oh, that's a way to that's how you tie it in right there.
You like that?
I didn't even see that coming.
It was a good one.
No, yeah.
You can take a couple of breaths, because I realized that just summarized K through 12 as a worthless endeavor for most people.
Pretty recently I saw a thing that said, it's like, man, I'm glad I learned about all those parallelograms and didn't learn how to, do my taxes. Oh, wait. And, but then I got to thinking, I was like, well, does anybody know how to do their taxes? Even the accountants don't know how to do the taxes. You have this accountant that does that's a whole other thing. But I'm just like, I mean, I do like that I had to take calculus, and I do understand a thing that explains another thing, like, lossless versus lossy audio compression. But that's real niche, and I would have learned that on my own anyway. But I did tie it in, and yeah, if there's a whole bunch of stuff that they tell you to learn and you don't actually need except for on test day. And it's how you indoctrinate people instead of, teaching them to think for themselves or, setting them up for success. If, what you just said, well, you're indoctrinating them into the American mindset, into the American society. And so we should value hard work. I've been telling my kids, like I'll tell them, I'll tell them that they're very smart. And then I'll say to them, do you know what's better than being smart? And they'll say, no, what? And I'll be like, hard work. And now they sometimes answer with hard work. And I said, do you know what's better than hard work? And they'll say, what? And I'll say, well, not working hard, but working smart. And I think the next thing that we're going to get to is like, it's better than working smart instead of hard. And the answer to that is dumb luck, being in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't think we've had this conversation. Maybe we have at some point in the past. But if I go back and look at what shaped me from an educational perspective, I can think of 4 classes, like literally 4 distinct classes out of 12 years of 5 to 7 classes per year that actually had a lasting influence on how I viewed or did anything from a either behavioral perspective or understanding or just something beyond core memorization or understanding of process. And it was eye-opening to a point to realize that I didn't really learn things that helped me in the world at large. I learned things that helped me pass tests. But those 4 classes taught me how to assimilate information and relate it to things that I knew or at least could understand in a way to guide decision making for something that was not known or was at least abstract enough to be uncertain. Which kind of leads to, it's not so much being smart or working hard or working smart. It's being able to understand unique or novel concepts in a way that allows you to not be fearful of those concepts.
I'm processing that.
I wonder if it actually comes across as clear as I feel like it does in my head, because it's a very abstract concept.
No. Like I was thinking about how like when I was in 8th grade, I did really well in 8th grade science, and I'd always enjoyed science, but I feel like that was like the first time, like 8th grade science was. Our science class was me making A's, and it felt effortless, and I was having fun doing it. And it was because it turned out that all the episodes of Bill Nye the Science Guy that I had been watching in 8th grade were applicable to what I was doing in science class in 8th grade. And so it was such an easy A. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, I'm not smart. I just remember what somebody else said. And I've always had this idea. I was like, I feel like I don't necessarily get the novel concepts or come up with the new good idea. I do sometimes, and I don't give myself enough credit when I think about this. But I always feel like I'm really good at taking information somebody else has said and making it my own, like understanding it the way I need to understand it to better understand the world or have a better or more accurate understanding of the world around me. And so, yeah, when you say more important than, I got to, working smarter rather than harder. But yeah, being able to not just grasp new concepts, but come up with new concepts, that's a big deal.
Well, and to be clear, I don't think it's even the origination of new concepts. I think it's just not being fearful of the misunderstood and being able to wrap some level of understanding around that unknown to the point where you can accept it. I think that's more kind of the guiding piece. And that doesn't do it justice. So let me rephrase it slightly. We understand the idea of remembering information, right? That at its most basic level, that's what education is attempting to do, is to get you to have a shared common knowledge base. The next level is to not only understand the past, but to be able to think of and grasp and understand present things as they relate to the past. And then the next level would be, instead of having to relate things, just think about doing things or living or whatever aspect or action or function in a more efficient approach. So that would be the concept of thinking smarter, right? It's that next level of, this is a complete unknown, but instead of being afraid of it, I'm willing to grasp it and figure out what pieces I can relate to what I do know to understand it. And I may not understand it fully, and I may not be able to even grasp it in my lifetime, but it's a lack of fearfulness of this unknown idea, which allows you to be able to attempt to dissect and understand it. Because if you're afraid of it, you run from it, or you look for a parallel to something that is known. But if you're not afraid of it, you're willing to be uncomfortable looking at and dissecting and trying to understand it. Does that make more sense or better illustrate it, I think?
No, I think it's better illustrated. It's just,
it's an extremely abstract concept, so it's difficult to talk about.
No, I mean, I can think of like how it's applicable in a practical way. And maybe it's, a good example is, why do we, we've had this conversation, or variations of this conversation many times, but like, people don't look things up if somebody's around that they can ask. And I don't, I never like thought, oh, that's just being lazy. It's not exactly that it's lazy. There's like a fear of looking things up. Well, what if I don't find it when I look for it? Or what if I find the wrong thing and think it's the right thing? Whereas if I ask somebody, there's a certain comfort level in there that they'll understand you completely, and they'll tell you what it is that you need to know, rather than rely on yourself being able to find that information and realize what it is you do and do not need.
That's definitely part of it. I want to add one little piece to it, and that is, I don't necessarily... let me change that slightly. It's not that I want to add to it, because that is absolutely 100% correct. It's that there's a secondary aspect to it that is really difficult for most people to understand exists, which is, how do you go about figuring out an unknown? Because our default tendency is to start to ask those around us to try to guide our understanding and shape how we figure out the unknown. And that's the missing skill set.
Oh, you're blowing my mind right now. Things I know that are articulated in a way that is just...
It's difficult. And this is the most abstract concept I think we have ever attempted to tackle in conversation. Because how do you approach an unknown? In a nutshell, that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
And once you understand that there's no reason to be fearful of the unknown, and instead you don't have to relate an unknown to a known, you just have to relate a component of an unknown idea to something that is known so that you can explore it. Like, that abstraction is very difficult to be able to identify and clearly understand. And I don't think that is something most people ever get to. And that's the problem, right? The fear of the unknown is what drives most responses at a fundamental behavior level. It's I don't know what this means. I don't know how to understand it. I don't know how to relate it to my experience. I am therefore afraid of it. Whereas if you have a different approach of, I don't know what this means, but you know what? That's okay. I can try to figure it out. Those are very different behavioral processes from each other.
Right. The latter is so much more empowering. And you can have this moment where you can do it with a safety net by trying to figure it out yourself, by going in and doing the investigating and doing the research. And then you can simply turn around and the person you're going to ask the question to, instead of asking them the question, you can get them to validate what you know, and it gives you such a better starting point, because then you're well into the understanding of the idea or trying to figure out the unknown, and various little things can be, the nuances of it can be discovered, rather than having to learn an entire something. And so, yeah, and it also changes the dynamic between the two people, the person who's trying to find the unknown and the person that they're asking. When it's asking, then you're pushing responsibility onto that person that you're asking, whereas if you're seeking confirmation, then it is I feel like a more a peer relationship rather than a person that has passing on knowledge to. So like an imbalance there.
I'm going to change your wording slightly.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you've invested some level of effort into understanding an idea, it's not validation. It's discussion about what something means from a perspective. One, the perspective of the person trying to understand it, and two, the perspective of the person living it, right? It's an attempt to understand what exactly this thing means. So it's not just validation. And the only reason I want to harp on it is because validation is only a part of that particular process. Yes, you want to validate that what you're thinking is accurate, but you want to go beyond validating that what you think is accurate and actually understanding how it influences someone's life. That's a component that if you leave it at the idea of validation, you miss that. Even though I know that's what you meant, I just want to make sure it's emphasized.
Oh yeah, I do appreciate that. I will allow it. No, it's very important because it gives you I was, my thought was like it gives you a jump start in the conversation, but no, it doesn't give you a jump start in the conversation. It prevents you from starting that conversation with a deficit.
Well, and it keeps you from being unintentionally offensive.
Oh, and it also gives you, you now have common ground with the person that you're asking question, and so it leads to. It often leads to better discussion and better, sharing of ideas, because you haven't bogged down that other person that might be, that you're asking.
Right. It's a combination of the other person realizes you truly are wanting to understand this particular thing, but it's also this other person now wants to truly understand where you're coming from. It's symbiotic to an extent that you have then two people trying to understand influences that may span a lifetime, instead of what does this particular statement mean to you? And that could span 10 minutes, a year. It's trying to really create a common ground to influence and shape the next steps. And I intentionally don't want to say the future as a whole, because it's not the future. It's literally, where do we go from here?
Yes. Yeah.
I feel like I've had my best moments for the show. I'm kind of tapped out.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like this is a good ending for this. Like, yeah, you got me with two. I had two moments of like, I had two gnarly moments like that.
It's what alcohol does. No, I say that, but I mean, I've spent so much time trying to figure out and understand this particular problem that, like, I couldn't begin to tell you how many times I've written things like this and then just trashed it because I didn't have enough of the full picture to try to publish it in a way that made sense. And so talking about it for some reason or another has allowed me to kind of glue these pieces together where writing has never been able to do so.
It's really interesting because of writing, talking has it's there's a dynamic there, and it brings out different aspects of a concept, whereas writing also has some very interesting interesting dynamics, and so I guess you have to do both. You have to talk about it and write about it.
Yeah, I have realized over the past, 6 to 10 episodes roughly, I have a lot of things I actually kind of want to write about, but it doesn't feel like I have a solid narrative to write more than a few sentences. And instead, if I talk about them, I can get the narrative across in a way that I can't seem to figure out how to write about. It's really odd, because if you go back, a decade plus, I would write about things because I couldn't figure out how to talk about them. It's literally the inverse. I don't know. It's fascinating, but eventually I'll get to the point where I can do both. That said, I think we've got our two shows.
I think so too. And then I guess we'll do a double the week before the 26th.
Yeah, so we're finally going to go up and visit Emily's parents up in Indiana, and I think I could take stuff and record, but I know their connection is flaky at times as far as throughput, so I don't want to run the risk.
Nah, I think no trouble doing a double again.
Yeah,
man, we used to do single episodes this long.
I know. It's kind of refreshing, actually, because I can find that long pause point, I can cut it, and it's, 30 minutes to 45 minutes that I edit one episode, and then I'm done.
Yep.
and then I have a bye week, and it's great because I don't know what to do with myself.
Yeah. Did you see that the Peak Designs has a V2 of their tech pouch, or field pouch rather?
I did. I can't find my 2 field pouches. I don't know what I did with them. I have them stashed in a bag somewhere, and I don't know where or what I decided to do when I reshuffled things over the past year because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because I literally pulled every bag I had and then started just shoving things into different places from a storage perspective.
Yeah.
So I have 2 filled pouches that I used to use, one to carry in my everyday bag, and one was just kind of a floater that I would use as needed. I don't even know where the hell I stashed them.
You'll find them.
Oh, eventually, yes. But it's ridiculous that I have not found them yet.
That is kind of funny. I can't remember if I talked about this or not, but I bought a field pouch not too long, like a few weeks ago, right before they did the V2.
You mentioned you bought a field pouch and a tech pouch, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
And it turned out I was when looking at the tech pouch, I was always just but now I'm oh, it's my favorite thing. It's my favorite one of all the things. I was surprised by that. But there's this moment where I'm oh, I kind of if I'd known, I might have waited for a field pouch, but I don't know. There's not that much different that I feel I should be ooh, I should have waited. But
yeah, the only thing I noticed that was really different was the one kind of zippered compartment.
I think there's more pockets for organization on the other side of the zipper compartment. The V1 has the compartment. It's just a zipper compartment. It doesn't have any of the organization inside. But there's organization on the outside of that zipper pocket as well that's not there.
Well, the V1 had 4 distinct pockets aside from the general, just large central cavern.
Yeah. And I think there's more dividers inside on the V2. And then it also comes with a strap, which I really don't care that much about.
I mean, I certainly get the inclusion of the strap because it was always billed, even with the V1, it was billed as a potential, if you added a strap or clipped it to something, it was a bag, a filled bag. But
yeah, because the V1 comes with the anchors.
Why? The V1 came with the anchors.
That's what I'm saying. The V1 comes with the anchors, so it's ready to go. It's strap ready.
Yep, right. But the filled pouch really, if you're using it as your sole bag, it's a very niche use case. Yeah, I feel like.
Yeah, I think I agree. I was never looking for it to have a strap. And when I saw that it came with 2 anchors, I was I could take these off and use them somewhere else. So,
I have so many of those anchors. It's funny, but at the same time, they're so useful. Because and part of it is because I use the cuff and the leash, the camera straps on 2 different camera bodies. So I have multiple anchors on the camera bodies based on ideal placement of the particular different straps. And so it's just easier to have multiple anchors and et cetera. But
pop them on.
Yeah, it's one of those things that if you're only doing the bags, I think the anchors are kind of ridiculous. But if you are doing a combination of the bags plus the different camera straps, they're a godsend. I mean, it's so easy to change between the different straps because of those anchors, and I never have to worry about whether it's secure. It's just it certainly is a nice camera first product. I don't even know if that's actually the accurate statement. It's a product that fits a need that could be extrapolated beyond the camera market, but is definitely served the camera market. That's a better way, I think, to think of it.
Yeah, it's a really elegant solution for use with cameras, and there definitely could be other uses for it, but the camera use case seems to be there's a reason it was made specifically that was what was in mind when it was being made.
Well, and the funny thing is, like, because that's my use case, like I can definitely see other use cases where it makes sense. It's just that the camera use case was the one that was so underserved or under thought that that's where it's made the most significant difference. But I can definitely see other things that are very well served by the same general solution. It's just that there were other solutions for those components that were at least okay. Whereas the camera side, it was always so horrible in comparison that it's nice to have something proper as a solution.
Yep. Somebody solved the problem, came up with a solution.
Well, I think unless you have anything else, that calls it.
Yeah, man.
All right, so next week we won't record. The week after that we will. I will try to come up with some decent show notes, of course, but I doubt I will prior to him. That gives us, 2 weeks before we need to record a double again?
Yeah, so next week no recording, week after single, then a double again.
Yeah, so I will try to at least prepare something for that double. I feel like that's kind of the least I can do.
I don't know. This one worked out pretty well for us.
Honestly, the nature of our conversations, I think any week could work out well for us.
That's true. I have actually a good one that we could do pretty soon, but there's some relatively short required reading.
All right. Well, we'll add some notes and look at it.
Yep. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.